was simple. They didn't have confidence in us. It's not lack of confidence in Scotland. It's not lack of confidence in the future. It's not because they're inherently conservative. It's because if you say you're going to go out and take a wonderful journey in a boat, and they don't believe your boat is seaworthy, they won't get on. That is the primary difficulty that we've got. Now, if you go and you look at what it is that they were saying gave them that impression, and this, I'm begging everybody, be subtle about this. People don't make opinions based on individual things. It's not this one thing. You absorb a number of impressions and they give you a sense of what you feel, what you think. So when I say it's currency but it wasn't currency, what that means is our target audience did not have in their mind a correct currency option. If you'd said to them, what exchange rate should Scotland be operating at, they would go, but that's not the point. They haven't got an answer in their head. They asked us, we blinked. Right? So they said, currency union. Osborne said no. They said, what's your plan B? And we went, What they said was not, you failed to find my answer, but you didn't have an answer. Right? So you weren't prepared. And if you're not prepared to introduce a currency, I can't trust my pension with you. I can't trust my mortgage with you.
I think that what the Scottish Government is trying to do is to avoid the question. They want people to feel comfortable. They think that talking about using the pound will do that. But in order for them to use the pound, what they will have to do is almost everything that Tim and the Scottish Currency Group think is important.
We had concerns from the very outset from the Growth Commission, where the Growth Commission originally suggested that an independent Scotland should share the British pound. And of course, being a banker, I knew from my travels across Europe, particularly working with MasterCard, that it was perfectly viable for a country the size of Scotland, with an economy the size of Scotland, to have its own currency. And even at the most, forget the actual economics of it, it just seemed totally illogical.
And I ended up working in Bloomberg, which, as many of you will know, is one of the largest financial news and information organisations in the world. Bloomberg had just set up a bureau in Scotland, and one of our senior editors in New York, a gentleman called Ken Cohen, a rather quirky, brusque New Yorker who had no time for any, what we all call BS, what you might say, asked me what I wanted to achieve from my work for Bloomberg in Edinburgh. I said I wanted to increase coverage of the Scottish Parliament, and he stopped me there. He said, from his opinion, no one cared a damn, or maybe it was a similar word, maybe it was that, about the Scottish Parliament. The only thing his readers were interested in Scotland was money and the vast amounts of assets that were run out of Edinburgh.
It is well understood that currency is one of the key issues which led many voters to reject Scottish independence. So what is currency? It is the name of the money used in a particular country. Examples: the pound, the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, the Hong Kong dollar, the Singapore dollar, the Bulgarian lev, the Botswanan pula, the Nepalese rupee. Money can have many names, shapes and forms. Cowries were used as currency in the markets of northern Ghana in the 1970s. In prisoner of war and concentration camps, cigarettes were used as money. 5,000 years ago, the Samaria people used barley money. This is possibly the earliest known use of what we now call money. Money is a token which represents a value. It is easier than bartering. If you have a pig and you need shoes, finding a shoemaker who needs a pig might be difficult. But if we give a value to the pig and a value to the shoes, and then we have a token, the pig can be exchanged, that is sold for, say, tokens £200, and the shoes can be bought for, say, £50. And so the exchange of goods and services becomes much easier. Different currencies attract different values. If an issuing government is trusted and runs a good economy, the currency used in that country will be perceived as having greater value than a country that has a poor economy. Currencies, therefore, can also be commodities. and can be bought and sold. Money is a social construct invented by humankind. Money does not exist in nature, and the value of it exists purely in the minds of humans. Your house may shelter you from the storm. It may be a place you can raise your family. You might like to consider it to be a financial asset. Indeed, your bank may have a charge on yours to secure a loan or a mortgage. However, the only time it has real monetary value is at the point of sale. That moment when someone hands over money and purchases it. For it to have monetary value again, a subsequent buyer must be found. Money is an illusion, but almost everyone in the world believes in it, and so it has a value. Money can buy practically anything. New forms of money are often being invented. Credit cards, Bitcoin for example.
After the experience in Iceland, I and some colleagues, we decided to start a new company. That company decided to use this new technology, the blockchain technology, to issue regular money, fiat currencies, euros, sterling, and so on blockchains. And the reason is we wanted to try to improve the system.
And it can be used for so many things other than to purchase goods and services. It is a measure of success and failure. It can also be a reward for good acts, or as a punishment, for example, when you overstay your parking and get fined. Governments can use it to promote those it wishes to encourage, and by withholding it, discourage the activities of those with whom it disapproves. It is a very complex affair, and it becomes more and more complex as the years roll on. Money also defines a sphere of influence. Scottish pounds are often rejected in English shops. Try paying for a cup of coffee in Glasgow with a Chilean peso. It will not work. The mighty US dollar is accepted in many places. In times of Alexander the Great, his coins were accepted far and wide. The English pound has declined in value for many, many years. Brexit's caused another downturn as people look for better markets in which to operate. Money is money everywhere you go, but a currency by any name is as sweet as the economy it serves. Money can be a weapon or a prize. It can satiate greed and hunger. It can compensate, substitute and repair. It causes feuds and settles arguments. Currency helps citizens feel that they belong to a country. It is the Swiss franc, the French franc, the Philippine peso, the South African rand. A currency can be a source of pride.
We need to make sure we have the designs and so on finalised for the notes, get them manufactured. I think we should have a national competition, put up a decent prize, sort of £50,000 or something for the first prize, and get people involved. Schools can come up with designs, graphic designers, artists, whatever, all come up with designs. Get people involved, and once you're in, you can do that now. Once you're involved with designing notes, you're not a no voter. You start planning for what's going to happen after independence. You've made that decision.
Currency can even produce emotional attachments. 15th of February 1971, the UK changed from pounds, shillings and pence to decimal currency, pounds and pence. People still question, what is that in old money? In 2002, the German people converted from the Deutschmark to the Euro, and before long people get used to the new. A new monarch on the throne, and the picture on the notes and coins changes. People just get along with the new tokens. They have no other choice. There are many who think that money is all that is required, but many live lives that are barely influenced by money. Burundi is often quoted as being the poorest country. What humans require to live are air, water, food, clothing, shelter, kindness, and the lucky ones might also even get a bit of love. In economics classes, I learned that economics is the study of the allocation of man and woman's scarce resources. I learned that land was a fixed resource. As Mark Twain said, buy land, they're not making any more of it. But the Hong Kong Chinese knocked over a big hill and filled up a bit of sea and built a new airport on it. The Dutch are good with that kind of thing too. Money is one of the mechanisms which we use to work out who deserves what. In a perfect market, all the buyers and all the sellers have complete knowledge of all the market and can move freely anywhere at any time. Markets are now distorted and corrupted by lack of knowledge, government intervention, rules, regulations, and a host of other factors. There are other economists who tell a different story. Paul Zane-Pilzer, for example, in his book Unlimited Wealth, writes that resources are not scarce, but that they are abundant. All in all, though, for many, the capitalist system that dominates the world now does provide much for many. But since the dawn of farming, elites have always erupted and made themselves rich on stolen excess yields, profits, whilst the poor create more children and therefore more mouths to feed. Most people in the world now are on the treadmill of the constant clamour for economic growth. We all want the new one that is shinier and better. And the planet we live on and the other creatures we live alongside are suffering. Things are so serious now that the survival of sapiens is truly in jeopardy. Can money save us? Or will it be the end of us? There are many reasons why countries require their own currency.
Had we been independent in 2014 and we were sharing the pound as recommended by the SNP at that time in the Growth Commission, and we faced COVID, the Scottish Government would have had to borrow hundreds of millions in sterling from the Bank of England to actually pay furlough payments in Scotland. Now that would have been a very significant debt, which would be so significant that it would have changed the economy of Scotland, because to repay the interest on that debt, never mind repay the capital, we would have to change our economy to earn export earnings, so we could earn the sterling from our exports to pay the interest on the loan and the capital eventually. Whereas if you have your own currency, you can actually borrow in your own currency from your own central bank, and it's impossible to default on borrowing in your own currency.
Why is it important to have your own currency? In very short, it is about, in my mind, two things. First, you want to optimize economic growth. That's what you want to do. Economic growth and prosperity is foundational for any nation. Number two, you want to avoid going or default on your own debt in your own currency. And if you have FX, if Scotland doesn't have its own currency, then Scotland can default on debt in, let's say, sterling or euro. And that's really a bad thing, believe me. Having been in Iceland and watched what happened over there. So the alternatives, in my mind, for Scotland are continue to use the sterling as is the case today, or join the EU and get the euro. I think that's, as I said, I think it's suboptimal for Scottish economy, and you're not using or you're not fostering your full potential. The British pound is optimized for the UK as a whole, and the euro is optimized for the eurozone as a whole. And then in my question, and the question that I would be asking is, why would Scotland settle for anything less than its own currency to optimize its own economic future?
It is very easy to succumb to the intoxication of promised better economic fortunes. History and the world of today shows, though, that elites are often the beneficiaries and the poor often end up paying the price. There is a term used in economics, opportunity cost. Simply put, when faced with a selection of choices 1, 2, 3 and 4, the cost of choosing choice 2 is the missed opportunity of choosing 1, 3 or 4. When in a room full of successful bankers and financiers who can choose any amount of the world's riches, one can almost believe that if they can do it, so can everyone else. Market forces take care of everything. So, if we only make more money, everyone will get more. A statement far from the truth. So when it comes to the opportunity cost of the GB pound, the Scottish pound, or the euro, for example, it is not a simple economic choice. The well-being of the society as a whole, to many of us, is far more important than the lie that more money will solve humankind's challenges. The European Union may be far from perfect, but it does show a path to cooperation and a willingness that by that cooperation to stop war before it starts, and to raise all of its citizens up, treating each member state with equal regard, unlike the situation in the United Kingdom, where the dominant forces of England can always prevail regardless of the aspiration of Northern Ireland, Wales or Scotland.
People often talk to me from the no side, oh, that everyone's going to move their money out of Scotland. Well, no, they're not, because we're going to do it for them. After Scotland introduces the Scottish pound, the link between Scotland and the Bank of England's payment systems will end. Anyone who says, oh, that we can just use the GB pound, England can't stop us, well, they actually can. They can't stop you using those coins, but they can just switch you off from the payment system. They did that with Russia. After the link is broken, then sterling or GB pounds, I prefer to call them GB pounds, forget those, sterling. It would not be able to stay in the Scottish Bank because it relies on being connected to the Bank of England and being under the regulation of the Bank of England. So if you already have an account at a bank which is legally English, so let's say Santander UK, nothing's going to happen because it's already an English bank. If you happen to have an account at the Royal Bank of Scotland, the Clydesdale Bank trading as Virgin Money, or the Bank of Scotland, they are legally Scottish banks. For example, RBS PLC is still a Scottish bank, publishes its own account. It's about 11% of the NatWest banking group. So it's owned by NatWest Bank, but it's legally a Scottish bank, still based at St Andrews Square in Edinburgh. All of their GB pound accounts will be moved to an English subsidiary, so they'll probably just become NatWest accounts, but they keep the same sort code and account number. So you won't notice that. It's just a legal change of domicile. It means that your GB pounds stay as they are, and they stay under the authorisation of the Bank of England. So it's a technicality, but it does mean, anyone says, oh, I'm going to move my GB pounds out of Scotland. No, we're going to do it, and they'll all be in England whether you like it or not, if you've asked for it. Is at the same time as your, say, RBS account moves to RBS England PLC, you'll have a new RBS Scotland account. And if you've asked to get to acquire some Scottish pounds or convert all your money, then what you had in the GB pound account, let's say you had £500, that would be sold to the Scottish Reserve Bank, who would issue 500 Scottish pounds, which will go to your new bank. Your GB pounds get sold to the central bank. Well, they do, because they'll disappear. There's approximately 200 billion that we all have. That's your savings account, cash ISA, the Fife Council spending account, Scottish Government's account, companies' accounts, all of that sort of stuff. About 200 billion. If we assume that people are canny, they don't convert at all immediately, we consider the position 2 years after the currency comes into use. Let's say people have held on to 20 billion of GB pounds, so 180 billion has been converted into Scottish pounds. Now you also have some money going the other way because, as Professor Lorenjo said, the liabilities need to be removed, so that's your loans. So your mortgage, your credit card debt, personal loans, those sort of things. So those are going the other way. So what happens, for example, with the mortgage, and bear in mind, mortgages are a minority interest. A lot of the ex-people talk about mortgages as if they were the most important thing on the planet. 2/3 of Scottish households do not have a mortgage. Mortgages are a rather sort of middle-class preoccupation. You've got 1/3 who are not in a position of being able to own a house at all and they're stuck in rented accommodation. You've got 1/3, which is mostly the more elderly population who own their house without a mortgage. You've got 1/3 who have a mortgage. So if you have a mortgage, all you need to do is tell the bank you want a new Scottish pound mortgage, so they give you, let's say you have a £100,000 mortgage, they grant you a £100,000 Scottish pound mortgage, they take the 100,000 Scottish pounds, they use it to repay the £100,000 English pound mortgage, which is now repaid, and you've got a Scottish pound mortgage instead. Easy. They'll just do it all for you. All you have to say is do it, done. So, there are about 75 billion of mortgages, so they would be repaid, so take that off. The rest of the loans and so forth all come to around about, we estimate, about 130 billion. Take that off the 180 billion that's coming in, the central bank ends up with approximately 50 billion of GB pounds, which becomes the foreign reserves of Scotland. So all these people are saying, oh, you haven't got reserves, you haven't got reserves. Well, we have, you've already got them. You're just going to hand them in and change them into something else. So, if you don't believe me, look at the Bank of Botswana website where it explains about the introduction of the Pula in 1976. And it says that when they replaced the South African rand, which is the all-powerful currency with their giant next-door neighbour, the IMF told them they were too small and too poor and too backward to have their own currency. And they said, no, we're going to do it anyway. And those rands became the first foreign reserves of Botswana.
My first question really is to you. What is it you really want? Do you want independence?
Yes.
Do you really want it?
Yes.
You just want a wee bit? Oh, okay. Because if you really want independence, there's a piece of work you need to start thinking about. And it's not dissimilar to what you'll hear in the rest of the conference in relation to currency or to payment systems. Because if you don't have control of regulation in your own country, you don't have independence. It really is that simple. At present, all regulatory activities for financial services are directed and enforced from London. The rules governing our financial sector are created and they are managed from London. People in London get to decide what companies in Scotland can do, what industries they work with, who's allowed to work for them, what they sell, and how they conduct their business. Take a moment to think about that. That's a level of control. If we want to be independent, we need to empower the Scottish Treasury to control the Scottish financial sector. We want to avoid the crashes that seem to recur from time to time. Financial services in Scotland are a large part of our economy. It's currently around 9%. And you let that be regulated from London. We need to run and own the rulemaking process. It's essential that Scotland assumes responsibility for creating and enforcing the financial regulations. And the proposal is that you maintain the existing regulations. Scotland would initially retain that regulatory structure and framework. You ensure stability while preparing to make the necessary adjustments. Over time, you can develop improved systems, and a Scottish Treasury may be aim to implement more efficient and forward-thinking systems and investment products. You can drive strategic investment, and this newfound control will allow us the key channel investments into projects that stimulate and sustain our economy. And a smooth transition is more important than anything else. Currently, the Scottish investment market is valued at about 500 billion and is worth about 10 billion to the Scottish economy. So these are quite big numbers. We need to get that right. So what do we need to consider? Is the scope of the work. The range of activities covered are extensive. There's 157 rule books managed just by the Prudential Regulatory Authority and 57 by the Financial Conduct Authority. Given the number of regulations, we have to accept the status quo between the transition. We'll be creating a new regulator. You clone the existing system, you use the existing data, and you bring it over. We must absolutely concentrate on the transfer of power, and much of this will require a degree of cooperation from London, because we want the data. So when I hear people shouting about, oh, let's just declare UDI and head off into the sunset, I go, that sounds risky, because they're not going to give you anything. Why should they?
Regulations are different from the so-called fiscal rules made up by governments.
Yeah. The fiscal rules are a total nonsense. Fiscal rules are created to give people the impression of prudence and capability, whereas they are the opposite. The situation, never mind Scotland, but the situation the United Kingdom's in right now, the very last thing we should be facing is austerity. You only need to look at the streets anywhere in Britain, not just Scotland, to see the difficulties in the infrastructure. And now we have the resources, we have the people, we could put these people to work, give them decent paying jobs. And we did it for the bankers in 2008. We created £400 billion of new money to actually keep their businesses going, to give them liquidity, to keep their banking industry going. And I speak as a banker. And of course another 400 billion was released into the British economy to pay furlough and keep the economy running. So there's no reason why right now we couldn't actually commit to raising more funds to actually create employment, to deal with all the issues we have across the National Health Service, infrastructure, etc. The only containment we'd have to be careful about is inflation. We would have to watch carefully and manage inflation through interest rates if we saw inflation becoming a problem.
The human notion that tokens called money have worth are supported by trust and confidence. If lost, financial structures collapse.
So in short, to be honest, I don't think we are being honest about where we are and what we've lost, and also what we gained. And I just want to say as well, I think there's a lack of ambition, and sometimes, I hope you'll forgive me on this as well, distrust of the finance industry. I believe the finance industry is key to Scotland's growth, key to our future here. But it's obviously, it attracts some bad press sometimes. Not so much out of Scotland, although we've had some, but not so much out of Scotland. So I try to make my business to let politicians of all backgrounds understand the strength of the Scottish financial industry. But I don't think they understand how important it is that we have senior jobs in Scotland. And again, that lack of ambition, that doesn't understand or celebrate that's the people that we have and had more of up here who look after money.
The purpose of a company is to make a profit. However, many Scottish companies were founded with the purpose of helping people. In sales training, I learnt that we should undercharge and over-deliver, and that money would then be the byproduct of the company's activities.
And I think to identify the founding of those companies where the purpose was, and that was the key thing, the purpose was to ensure that no widows and orphans were left behind when these people died. That was the purpose. It wasn't to make money. That was the purpose, and that's why they weren't £1 out. So, and I think that is something that I still think is part of what was the basis of the Scottish finance industry and what makes it different, special, and dare I say it, better than other places.
These are the things about, do we have a deficit and a debt? And every state pretty much runs a deficit most of the time. It's just the normal for independent countries, and it's how your money is created. If you don't run a deficit, then there's going to be a shortage of money in your economy. Is an independent Scotland going to have debt? No. And we are not taking a share of the UK national debt because it's also the UK national savings, and which country in their right mind hands over a share of the national savings to a foreign country? Nobody. Which is why no country, none of the 61 countries that have ever left the Empire, took any share of the UK's debt, ever. And don't tell me about Ireland, because they didn't. So, you see, I get attacked on X all the time about but Ireland. No, that was a farm loan scheme where the farmers repaid the loans that they had.
Hear the coin jingle in my pocket, feel the note rustle in mine. All pound notes and fivers, with this I can demand. But I tell you, I'd give all of it, and 100 times more, if I could be what I want to be, and nothing more. I got my checkbook handy, I got some money in the bank, and I've got an account on deposit, another in the savings bank. But I tell you, I'd give all of it, and 100 times more, if I could be what I want to be, and nothing more. Well, I've seen Fort Knox on the TV, I watched the gold yellow bars, with my feet on the settee. Well, I steered really hard, but I tell you, I'd give all of it, and 100 times more, if I could be what I want to be, and nothing more. If I could be what I want to be, and nothing